Language is about so much more than just words. It's a legacy, a heritage we pass on. And to celebrate this year's Les Nuits de la Lecture, which celebrates heritage through literature, we're tackling your top 3 questions about bilingualism with linguist, author, and multilingual mom, Malwina Gudowska. Malwina is the author of this phenomenal book, Mother Tongue Tied on Language, Motherhood, and Multilingualism, Disrupting Myths and Finding Meaning. Her work shines a light on multilingual mothering in a deeply relatable and thoughtful way, and she's perfectly positioned to answer some of our top questions about bilingualism. So let's dive in. Firstly, what do you think is the biggest misconception about raising bilingual children?
So I, of course, want to mention the two common ones that are still very much perpetuated despite being disproven and debunked for many, many years with excellent research. And that is, of course, that bilingualism confuses children, or that bilingualism, multilingualism may cause delays in speech development, language. And we know this is absolutely not true. These are myths. Children have an incredible ability to learn multiple languages from birth, whether it's multiple at the same time or sequential. Another misconception that I want to mention that I think we don't necessarily consider a misconception often, but it's very common, is that raising bilingual children is easy. And you hear that children are sponges. They will absorb a language. It's easy for them to learn, especially early on. And although, it may seem that it's easy for children to become multilingual, it actually takes a lot of effort. And in fact, it takes a lot of effort for the entire family, especially when it's a heritage language. I think this myth can be detrimental because when the reality and the expectation don't match up for families, there can be disappointment and frustration. And if I think we go into raising bilingual children knowing that it's not easy, it takes effort, it takes work, it takes emotional and physical labor, and we need support doing it, then I think it will be much better for the parents, for the children, for the well-being of the family, rather than just, assuming that it's going to be something very easy. And then when it doesn't happen that way, it can become quite upsetting for a lot of families.
Here's a challenge many parents face. What advice would you give to parents whose children refuse to speak their heritage or target language?
A really tough one because it is so common. It happens in my family. And it can be really upsetting and really awful and sad and frustrating. First of all, if possible, I encourage parents to find the cause or the root of why this is happening. This might be a bit more challenging with younger children. With older children, you can have a conversation about it. Is it something about how the child doesn't feel comfortable in the language? Is it a matter of dominance? So they're more dominant in the community language and they just feel it's easier. Is it a matter of a bad experience, something to do with the heritage language in a peer group or outside the home? It can be a lot of different factors. And I think realizing or finding out what it is that is making the child refuse to speak the heritage language will then can begin that change in the family. And on that note, I think then looking at the environment of the family, what is the entire family doing in terms of supporting the heritage language? Is there enough exposure? Is there enough input? These can be really tricky because there's only so much time in the day and everybody's very busy. But looking at that environment and seeing where everybody, what role is everyone playing, and how can we make it easier in a way, better for the child to hopefully come around to the heritage language, to using it. I think that, no matter what, no one can do this alone. And so once you hopefully have established the root cause of why the child isn't using the heritage language, then comes in the support. So looking at, are there play groups if the children are little? Are there peer groups? Sometimes even having families around you that not necessarily use the same heritage language, but can be multilingual, and you can have that as an example of, the awesomeness of multilingualism. Whether that's maybe FaceTiming with family members who can help, who can interact with the child in the heritage language. Media, so encouraging books in the heritage language, TV, just getting the support anywhere you can, so that you're not feeling alone in trying to activate this heritage language. And you can do things like make a connection with something that the child is passionate about. Can there be a connection of this activity, or there's something that can be done in a heritage language, or that you can bring in the heritage language? There's many different strategies, but I think number one is just finding out what is happening. Why is the child feeling like this? Because I think in a situation where a child is refusing to use the heritage language can often become incredibly upsetting for both the parent, and it can be a lot of head-to-head without actually finding a solution to what's going on.
Your book beautifully captures the emotional weight of raising multilingual children. What advice would you give to mothers who are navigating this pressure of preserving their heritage language?
It is so hard, and it's absolutely pressure to do with mothering and caregiving and parenthood. I think we have to remember just to be gentle with ourselves, and that we are enough, and that we're doing an amazing job already. And then I think it's really important, again, already what I've said about remembering that it's not easy. Raising bilingual children is emotional and physical labor that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of emotions. And I think if you do remember that, and if I remind myself that all the time, then I think it becomes something that that's ongoing, and that I know that's often going to change. I think sometimes a family language plan is really important, especially if you're co-parenting, what the family, and even involving children, what you want it as a family to be. But I think also remembering that plans change. Expectations aren't always reality. Language is fluid. Children grow. Adults grow in different ways too, and change. Language dominance can change. So many factors that come into play. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Okay to be frustrated, but I would say try to let go of any guilt. It doesn't serve you. It's pointless. Take that away and see what can be done to hopefully, encourage the well-being of everyone in the family. And I think the way when children get older, it's really great to involve them. Something that I think is really hard to acknowledge is that our childhoods aren't our children's childhoods, and our connection to heritage language isn't necessarily the connection our children will have to the heritage language, but that's okay. We can do our best to foster those connections, to encourage that multilingualism, and then our children will take it from there. That will make it easier, that will make it feel like you're not on a solo mission here. That would be the advice. So, merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité à Bilingues Plus et à La Nuit de la Lecture. Bonne journée.
Be sure to get your copy of Malvina's book and let us know in the comments if you've already read it. We can't wait to celebrate Les Nuits de la Lecture with you this weekend.